Hello, folks. Welcome to another chess time with folks. And today we'll be taking a step forward in our chess game as we continue learning from where we stopped in the last video. And I believe that you've been having fun. Yes. So let us get right into it. Alright. So welcome to today's lesson. Remember, in the last video we actually looked at our armies, introducing you to the pawns, to the knights, to the bishop, to the rook, to the queen, to the king, and definitely the same thing on the black side. And let me tell you a little bit of, should I say, information, just something little for the journey. The pawn is known to be the weakest piece on the army, while the queen is known to be the most powerful in the army. Don't worry, when we get to the point where I'll be explaining how the queen moves, the details and the facts about the queen, you'll get to understand why the queen is known as the most powerful. And then lastly, but not the least, the king is the most important piece in the army. That is why if you look at the structure, you see that the king itself is surrounded by all these armies, and that means that we are working together as a team to protect our king. That is why the king is the most important. What that means is, if anything at all happens to the king, the game is over. That is basically a brief detail about what the game of chess is all about. Then today we'll be looking at the pawn. What exactly is the pawn? How does the pawn move? How does the pawn captures and all of that? The pawn is, in a simple way, known to be the foot soldiers in the chess army. So imagine this: if you've seen all these ancient movies, Korean movies, or whatever movies where you see armies, you see that there are people, or let me say there are soldiers who ride the horses. There are some that are known to be the most powerful, and there are specific set of soldiers who walk barefooted. Many of them walk on the foot, while some ride the horses and the likes. So imagine those foot armies as the pawn. That means they are the weakest, maybe not entirely weak, but not as strong as some of the major soldiers. So today we'll be looking at these foot armies and the role they play. They are actually important. Maybe not the most important pieces, but they are important as far as the game of chess is concerned. So we are looking at the pawns. And remember what I said in the last video, that each of those pawns have a point attached to them, which means every pawn has one point. What that means is, if any of those pawns is captured during the game of chess, you have a point attached to you, and it means if you happen to capture all the 8 points, you have won 8 points for yourself. And now down to how the pawn moves. Very simple, very basic. Each of these pawns, as far as the game is concerned, can only take a step at a time. Just imagine this: you are taking one step at a time to ensure that you get to a particular point. That is exactly what the pawn is all about. So you play like this, you move a piece. That means you are moving the d2 pawn to the square d3. And there is a single rule. In fact, there are 2 rules as far as pawns are concerned. The first is, the pawn can never go backwards. That means anytime a pawn is moved forward, at no point or for no reason will the pawn get back to this square or even back to this square. It will always remain like this or keep moving forward. And the second rule is that the pawn keeps moving on a single file. That means this particular pawn on a file will only keep moving forward on the same a file till the end of the game. However, there is an exception, and that takes us to how the pawn captures. So the question is, how exactly does the pawn captures? However, there is a boost as far as the pawn is concerned. I don't know if you know the game Subway Surfers. If you do, you will know that there is a particular point in the game where the runner picks up a jetpack, and what that jetpack does is it boosts the runner forward. That is applicable here. What that means is, from the very starting point of the game, the pawn has a booster, which means it can go 2 squares for the first move. However, after this first move, it can only keep moving forward. Let me repeat that. The same thing is applicable to the black square. That means any of these pawns, there is a bonus, or let me say there is a boost. For the first move of the game, the pawn has a boost of 2 squares for the first move, which means you can either decide to move it or you can decide not to use the boost. That means you can play like this and play 2 squares for the first move. However, after this move, it can only keep moving 1 square forward. The same thing is applicable to the other squares. You can decide to move 2 squares forward, and in this case you can decide to just take a square forward. However, after taking this square, you can no longer take the 2 moves. It can only take 1 move at a time. That is that. And remember, let us go back to where we started. I said that the pawn will keep moving on the same file where it is, but there is a clause, there is a change where the pawn captures. So how exactly does the pawn capture a piece in the game of chess? So the pawn is actually capable of capturing any piece at all, as far as this game is concerned. There is a way the pawn captures. The pawn can capture any piece adjacent it, or any piece diagonal to where the pawn is standing on. What does it mean for a piece to be diagonal? Let us assume this is the pawn. Any piece here or any piece here is liable to be captured by this pawn. What does that mean? That means if we have a pawn in this case, that means this white pawn can capture this black pawn, and that means this piece has changed its file. Do you understand? Let me take that again. Remember, the pawn can take a step at a time. However, we've established that there is a boost. That means for the first move of the game, it is capable of taking 2 squares first. However, after this first move, it can only take 1 square afterwards. The same thing is applicable to all the other pieces. You can choose to take the 2 squares, you can choose to take 1 square, but after each of these moves, it can only take 1 square forward and another square forward. However, we've also said, how does the pawn capture? If you play your piece 2 squares, let's say this captures place 2 squares. We've said the pawn can take any piece adjacent it. What that means, let's say I play this as my second move. This black piece has a chance to capture. Why? The same way the white can capture any piece adjacent it, this can also, the black piece can also capture any piece adjacent it like this. Now, there's a rule. The white pieces go upward, the black pieces come downward. So while the white pieces capture upward, the black piece captures downward, and that means this can go like this and capture this piece. By capturing this piece, it takes its position and keeps moving forward. I hope that is clear. Let me give you a little bit of one example. Let us assume this place like this. This white piece has the ability to take this and assume its position, and it keeps moving forward afterwards. Same here, it keeps moving forward. But what can you say? In this particular position and this particular position, What do you think is the case? That means this can capture this and this can capture this. Till you get that. So that will be the end of today's video, and I will see you in the next one. I remain folks, and stay tuned till the next time. See you.